Truth doesn't argue, Captain Robert Hayes said quietly, but the room did anyway. The map lay stretched across the wooden table, its edges curled from heat and humidity, ink lines cutting through towns and rivers like decisions already made. Anna Weiss stood on the other side, hands still, shoulders straight, her silence sharper than any denial. They had been questioning her for 12 minutes. 12 long minutes of overlapping voices, of boots shifting against the floor, of a clock ticking somewhere behind the wall like it had somewhere else to be. "Your report is inconsistent," one officer said. "This location doesn't exist," another added. Hayes didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You expect us to believe you walked 8 miles and saw something no one else did?" 8 miles. Anna didn't correct him. It had been closer to 10. The detail stayed with her, not for them. Her eyes didn't move to Hayes. They stayed on the map. A small detail caught the light, her boots. Dry at the top, but along the edges, dark soil clung in thin, uneven layers. Not the pale dust of the camp. Not the reddish clay from the southern road. Something heavier. Something damp. The kind of soil that held water longer than it should. Hayes noticed it without knowing why. "Look at me when I'm speaking," an officer snapped. Anna didn't. She inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that didn't ask permission. The room pressed in. A chair creaked. Paper shifted. Someone tapped a pencil once, then again. The clock ticked. Hayes leaned forward, both hands on the table now, his shadow stretching across the map until it reached her side. "Last chance," he said. Not loud. Final. Anna moved then. Not quickly. Not hesitantly. One step forward, measured in inches, not feet. Her hand lifted, fingers steady, no tremor, no rush. She didn't look at Hayes. She didn't look at anyone. She pointed. Not broadly. Not vaguely. A single precise spot, where a thin blue line curved around a patch of green barely marked, a place most would overlook because it didn't seem important enough to name. No explanation followed. No defense. Just that one gesture, held in the air like it had weight. The room didn't react at first. It stalled. Sound drained out of it, leaving only the faint hum of something electrical in the corner. Hayes followed her. Finger. The map didn't argue. It never did. Lines stayed where they were drawn. Distances didn't change. Terrain didn't care who believed in it. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in recalculation. Behind him, the door opened with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Boots crossed the floor, faster than before. A scout, still catching his breath. "Sir," he said, voice low, controlled, but carrying something new. "We checked the coordinates." Hayes didn't turn yet. And? A pause. Just enough to shift everything. "She's right." The words didn't echo. They settled. Hayes straightened slowly, his hands leaving the map, the space between them and Anna suddenly wider than it had been seconds ago. For the first time, he looked directly at her. Not as a problem. Not as a report. As something else. Anna lowered her hand. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. The map was still there. And now, so was the truth. The room did not return to normal. It adjusted. Subtly. Like a lens turning until everything came into focus. Captain Robert Hayes stepped back from the table, not abruptly, but enough to create space where there had been pressure. The officers who had spoken the loudest now said nothing at all. One of them cleared his throat, then stopped halfway through the sound, as if even that felt unnecessary. The map remained exactly where it had been, but it no longer felt like an object under question. It felt like evidence that had already decided. Hayes looked again at the point Anna had chosen. A place most men would have ignored. No marked road. No recorded activity. Just a narrow river bend and a patch of terrain that looked unremarkable unless you knew what to look for. How did you know? He asked. Not as an accusation. As a question that required an answer. Anna did not respond immediately. She shifted her weight slightly, her boots pressing softly against the wooden floor. That same dark soil still clung to the edges, drying now, but still visible. The ground holds water there, she said finally, her voice calm, steady, untouched by the tension that had filled the room minutes before. It slows movement. Anyone passing through would leave a trace longer than expected. No one interrupted her. There is a narrow path, not marked. It is used only when the main road is watched. Hayes listened without moving. Around him, the others did the same. Not because they were told to. Because something in her tone made interruption feel misplaced. You walked it? He asked. Yes. Alone. A brief pause. Not hesitation. Just precision. Yes. Hayes nodded once, absorbing the information like he would any field report, but there was a difference now. He was not verifying her. He was learning from her. One of the younger officers stepped closer to the table, studying the map as if it might reveal something new now that she had spoken. We missed it, he said under his breath. It was not directed at anyone, but everyone heard it. Hayes straightened fully, his posture no longer leaning into confrontation but settling into something measured, controlled. He glanced toward the scout who had delivered the confirmation. Have a team recheck the surrounding area, he said. Slow. Careful. No assumptions. The scout nodded and left, the door closing softly behind him. The sound did not break the quiet. It framed it. Hayes turned back to Anna. For a moment, he did not speak. He simply looked at her, as if recalibrating everything he thought he understood about the situation, about her, about the line between suspicion and truth. You did not defend yourself, he said. It was not a question. Anna met his gaze for the first time. Not challengingly. Not cautiously. Simply directly. It would not have helped, she replied. Hayes considered that. Around them, the room seemed larger now, the tension replaced by something else. Not comfort. Not yet. But clarity. He nodded once more, slower this time. No, he said quietly. It would not have. His hand moved back toward the table, but he did not press it down this time. He rested it lightly on the edge, as if acknowledging the map rather than controlling it. From now on, he continued, his voice even, carrying across the room without force, we listen before we decide. No one objected. No one needed to. The shift had already happened. Anna stepped back to where she had been standing before, her presence unchanged, but the way the room held her was different. She was no longer the center of doubt. She was part of the solution. The map stayed open. The point she had indicated remained marked only by memory. No circle. No ink. It did not need one. Everyone in the room knew exactly where it was now. And no one questioned it. The map stayed on the table long after the voices were gone. Afternoon light shifted through the window, sliding across its surface inch by inch, turning blue rivers into thin lines of silver. Captain Robert Hayes remained where he was, one hand resting near the edge, not touching the marked point but not moving away from it either. The room had emptied slowly, as if no one wanted to be the first to leave. Now it was quiet. Not tense. Not heavy. Just quiet in a way that allowed thoughts to settle. Anna Weiss stood near the far wall, exactly where she had stepped back to, her posture unchanged, her presence steady, like she had not moved at all. Hayes glanced at her again, then back to the map. 10 miles, he said, almost to himself. Through terrain no one else thought to check. Anna did not answer. Not because she was withholding anything. Because the statement did not require it. Hayes exhaled slowly, a controlled breath that carried no frustration, only recalibration. He reached for a pencil lying beside the map, turned it once between his fingers, then set it down without marking anything. The absence of a mark felt deliberate. Outside, a truck passed, its engine low and distant, the sound fading quickly as if it belonged to another place entirely. "Why did you not say all of this earlier?" he asked after a moment. Anna shifted her gaze slightly, not away, but toward the window where the light had begun to change color. "You had already decided," she said. Her voice was even, not accusing, not defensive. Just clear. Hayes absorbed that without interruption. He did not deny it. The truth did not need correction. He nodded once, slower than before. "That is fair," he said. The words did not sound like concession. They sounded like recognition. He stepped around the table, not toward her directly, but closer than before, closing a distance that had not been measured in feet. "Walk me through it," he said. Anna paused for a brief second, then stepped forward again, this time without hesitation, her movement quiet but certain. She reached the table and placed her hand just above the map, not touching it yet, as if aligning memory with paper. "Here," she said, indicating the edge of the river bend again. "The ground is soft. It holds impressions longer. Even after 12 hours. Hayes followed her hand closely. "And the path?" he asked. "Narrow," she replied. "Hidden by brush. It does not look like a path unless you are already looking for one." Her finger moved slightly, tracing a line that did not exist on the map but existed in her memory. "It curves here, then rises slightly. From there, you can see movement without being seen." Hayes leaned in just enough to understand the angle she described, his focus narrowing, not on her now, but on what she saw. "You noticed all of that in one pass?" he asked. Anna lowered her hand. "You do not need to see everything," she said. "Only what matters." The sentence stayed in the air longer than expected. Hayes straightened again, his expression unchanged, but something behind it had shifted further, settling into place. He looked at the map one more time, then at Anna, not as someone under question, but as someone who had already answered it. "We missed what was right in front of us," he said quietly. Anna did not respond. She did not need to agree. The truth was already there, laid out in ink and distance and silence. Hayes gave a small nod, more to himself than to her, then turned slightly toward the door, as if preparing for the next step. But he paused. Just for a moment. Long enough to look back at the map again, and then at her. As if committing both to memory in the same way. Evening came slowly, the kind that did not arrive all at once but settled in layers, softening edges, dimming colors, stretching shadows across the floor. The map was still there, unchanged, but the room around it felt different now, like a place that had learned something it could not unlearn. Captain Robert Hayes stood near the window, looking out toward the far line of trees where the light was fading into a muted gold. Behind him, the table remained undisturbed. No markings had been added. No corrections made. It did not need them. Anna Weiss stood where she had been, her presence as steady as before, but now there was no distance left that needed to be measured. It had already been crossed. Hayes turned back toward the room, his movement unhurried, deliberate. "They will return before dark," he said, more to the space than to her, but the words reached her anyway. Anna gave a slight nod, acknowledging the statement without adding to it. Silence followed, not empty, but full of everything that had already been understood. A faint breeze moved through the open window, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant earth, brushing lightly against the edges of the map, lifting one corner just enough to remind them it was paper, not permanence. Hayes stepped back toward the table, this time without hesitation. He placed both hands lightly on either side of the map, not pressing down, not controlling it, just present. His eyes moved once more to the point she had shown him, then along the invisible path she had described. We build plans on what we think we know, he said quietly. And sometimes we never question where that knowledge came from. Anna watched the map, not him. The ground does not change because we misunderstand it, she replied. Hayes let out a small breath, almost a quiet acknowledgement of something larger than the room itself. Outside, footsteps approached, steady, purposeful. The door opened, and the same scout from earlier stepped inside, his expression composed, but carrying the weight of confirmation. Sir, he said. Hayes did not turn immediately. Report. The scout stepped closer, glancing briefly at Anna before focusing back on Hayes. The path is there. Just like she said. Narrow, hidden. Tracks held longer than expected. We would have missed it. Hayes nodded once, the motion small but final. And the vantage point? Clear view of the approach, the scout answered. Exactly as described. Hayes closed his eyes for a brief second, not out of fatigue, but as if aligning what he heard with what he now understood. When he opened them again, the room felt even quieter than before. Thank you, he said. The scout stepped back, then left, the door closing with the same soft sound as before. Hayes turned toward Anna, fully this time. There was no authority in his stance now. No pressure. Only clarity. You saw what we did not, he said. Anna held his gaze, calm, unwavering. It was there, she replied. You just were not looking for it. Hayes considered that, then gave a slow nod. He stepped aside from the table, creating space where there had once been tension. From now on, he said, his voice steady, carrying a different kind of weight, we look again. Anna did not respond. She did not need to. The map remained open, quiet, unchanged. But everything around it had shifted. And this time, no one argued with what it showed. The night settled fully, pressing gently against the windows, turning the outside world into a reflection of the room itself. Lamps were lit one by one, their warm glow pooling across the wooden table, softening the sharp lines of the map but not erasing them. Captain Robert Hayes remained standing, though the tension that once held his posture had long since dissolved into something quieter, something deliberate. The map no longer felt like a problem to solve. It felt like a conversation that had already been answered, if only someone had known where to look. Anna Weiss stood near the same place, but the distance between them had changed in a way that could not be measured in steps. Hayes reached for a cup of coffee that had gone untouched for hours. He lifted it, paused, then set it back down without drinking. Even small habits seemed less important now. You said the ground holds impressions longer there, he began, his voice steady, not probing, but building. Anna nodded once. Yes. Hayes glanced toward the window, then back to her. How long, he asked. Anna considered the question for a brief moment, not searching for an answer, but selecting the precise one. Up to 18 hours, depending on the moisture, she said. Longer if the temperature drops overnight. Hayes absorbed that, his expression unchanged, but his attention sharpened. And no one else reported this. Anna's gaze returned to the map. No one else walked it the way I did, she replied. Hayes let that settle. Around them, the quiet was no longer uncertain. It was focused. A different kind of tension had taken its place, not built on doubt, but on understanding something that had almost been missed. He stepped closer to the table again, this time picking up the pencil and turning it slowly between his fingers. For a moment, it seemed like he might mark the map, circle the point, define it. But he did not. Instead, he placed the pencil down beside it once more. If we had dismissed you, he said, his voice low, almost reflective, we would have built everything on the wrong assumption. Anna did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice remained calm, unchanged. You almost did. The statement did not carry accusation. It carried fact. Hayes nodded once, accepting it without resistance. Outside, the night deepened, the faint sound of wind moving through trees reaching the edges of the room. Inside, nothing moved except thought. Hayes looked at her again, not as an outsider, not as a variable, but as part of the structure now taking shape. "What else are we not seeing?" he asked. It was not directed at her alone. It was a question that expanded beyond the map, beyond the room. Anna shifted her gaze slightly, not away, but across the map, as if tracing possibilities that had not yet been drawn. "The obvious things," she said. "The ones that look too small to matter." Hayes held that in silence. Then he gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. "Then we start there," he said. He straightened, stepping back just enough to take in the entire table, the entire map, the entire moment. The lines had not changed. The distances remained the same. But the way they understood them had shifted completely. Anna remained still, her presence steady, unchanged. She had not raised her voice. She had not argued. She had not needed to. The map had done what words could not. And now, for the first time, everyone in the room was finally reading it the same way. The lamp flickered once, then steadied, casting a warm circle of light that held the table in quiet focus while the rest of the room faded into shadow. Captain Robert Hayes did not move for several seconds, as if letting the silence finish what words could not. The map remained open, its lines calm, unchanged, patient in a way people rarely were. Anna Weiss stood across from him, her posture the same, her presence no louder than before, yet impossible to overlook now. Hayes reached forward again, but this time not toward the center of the map. His fingers rested near the edges, tracing the borders instead of the obvious paths. "We have been reading this wrong," he said, not to her, not to anyone in particular, but to the realization itself. Anna watched without interrupting. "We keep looking at the main roads," he continued, his voice low, steady, "the places that are easy to follow, easy to confirm." His hand paused. "But those are the first places anyone would expect us to look." Anna gave a slight nod, almost imperceptible. "The obvious paths are the loud ones," she said. "They draw attention." Hayes glanced up briefly, then back to the map. "And the quiet ones?" Anna's eyes moved to the same narrow curve she had pointed to before. "They are still there," she said. "You just have to choose to see them." The sentence settled into the room, not as instruction, but as something closer to principle. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing softly against the building, a low, steady sound that carried no urgency, only presence. Hayes straightened slightly, his shoulders easing in a way that suggested not relief, but alignment. He picked up the pencil again, turning it once more between his fingers, but this time he did not hesitate as long. He leaned forward and made a small, precise mark. Not a circle. Not a bold line. Just a quiet indication, placed exactly where her finger had been earlier. The graphite touched the paper with a faint sound, barely audible, but final in its intent. He set the pencil down. "We begin here," he said. Anna watched the mark, then looked at him, her expression unchanged, but her eyes carrying a clarity that matched the moment. "You should have begun there earlier," she replied. There was no accusation in her tone. Only truth. Hayes nodded once, accepting it without resistance. "Yes," he said. "We should have." The room held that admission without reacting to it. No one needed to. The weight of it was already understood. A clock somewhere down the hall ticked steadily, marking time that no longer felt rushed. Hayes stepped back from the table, giving space to the map, to the mark, to the shift that had already taken place. "Tomorrow," he said, his voice measured, "we re-examine everything. Every report. Every assumption." He paused, then added, "starting with the parts we ignored." Anna did not respond immediately. She let the words settle, then gave a small nod. "That is where the truth usually is," she said. Hayes allowed himself a brief, almost imperceptible breath of acknowledgement. Not agreement alone, but understanding earned. The lamp continued to burn steadily, its light fixed on the map, on the single mark that had not been there before. It did not change the terrain. It did not redraw the lines. It only revealed what had always been present. And in that quiet room, with nothing raised and nothing forced, the direction had already changed. Morning arrived without announcement, a gradual shift in light that replaced the warmth of the lamp with something cooler, clearer, less forgiving. The map remained where it had been left, the small graphite mark still precise, still quiet, still enough. Captain Robert Hayes entered first, his steps measured, carrying none of the urgency that had filled the room the day before. He paused just inside the doorway, letting his eyes adjust, not to the light, but to the memory of what had changed. Anna Weiss was already there. She stood near the table, not studying the map, not revisiting it, but simply present, as if she understood that nothing on it had altered overnight. Hayes stepped forward, placing a folder beside the map. The paper inside was thicker, official, structured in a way that suggested certainty. He opened it, scanning the lines, then closed it again without comment. "Reports," he said. "From the last 3 days." Anna did not move. "And?" she asked. Hayes rested his hand lightly on the folder. "They all follow the same pattern," he replied. "Main routes. Confirmed checkpoints. Expected movement." He glanced at the map, then back at the folder. "Nothing about what we missed." Anna's gaze shifted slightly toward the table, not focusing on the mark, but aware of it. "Because it was not expected," she said. Hayes nodded once. "Yes." He opened the folder again, this time pulling out a single sheet and placing it beside the map. The paper described distances, times, observations. Clean. Ordered. Incomplete. "We trusted this," he said. "Because it looked complete." Anna stepped closer, her movement quiet, controlled. She looked at the sheet briefly, then back at the map. "It is complete," she said. "Just not correct." The distinction settled between them, subtle but absolute. Hayes let out a slow breath, then reached for the pencil again. He did not add another mark. Instead, he drew a faint line from the report's described route toward the point she had shown him, not connecting them, but placing them side by side. "Parallel," he said quietly. "Two versions of the same ground." Anna watched the line. Form, her expression unchanged. "One seen," she replied. "One understood." Hayes placed the pencil down. The room remained still, but the work had already begun. Outside, voices carried faintly, distant, routine, unaware of the shift taking place inside. Hayes straightened, his posture no longer shaped by assumption, but by intent. "Today," he said, "we stop choosing what is easiest to confirm." He glanced at the map again, then at Anna. "We start choosing what is hardest to ignore." Anna gave a small nod. "Not agreement. Recognition." Hayes picked up the folder, closing it with a soft, final motion. He did not discard it. He did not dismiss it. He simply held it differently now. "You will walk it again," he said, his tone steady, not commanding, but trusting. Anna met his gaze. "Yes," she said. No hesitation. No emphasis. Just certainty. Hayes turned toward the door, then paused, his hand resting lightly against the frame. He looked back once more, not at the map this time, but at her. "This time," he added, "we follow your direction." Anna did not respond. She did not need to. The map remained open, the mark unchanged, the line beside it quiet but clear. And for the first time, the path forward did not need to be argued. It only needed to be walked. The air outside felt different from the moment they stepped beyond the building, cooler in the morning light, carrying a faint trace of moisture that had not yet burned away. The ground stretched ahead in uneven tones of brown and green, the kind of terrain that did not announce itself, that blended into the horizon unless someone knew what to notice. Captain Robert Hayes walked a half-step behind Anna Weiss, not out of hesitation, but by choice, allowing her pace to set the rhythm. There were no markers here. No signs. Just land. How far? He asked after a few minutes, his voice low, not to disturb the quiet around them. Just under 10 miles, Anna replied, her eyes forward, scanning without appearing to search. Hayes nodded, adjusting his stride slightly, matching hers more precisely. The path they followed was not visible in the way most paths were. There were no clear edges, no worn tracks pressed deep into the soil. Only subtle shifts. Slight compressions. Small interruptions in the natural pattern of growth. Anna slowed once, then stopped. She looked down, not abruptly, but with intention. Hayes followed her gaze. The ground beneath them looked ordinary at first glance, dry in places, slightly darker in others. Here, she said quietly. Hayes crouched slightly, studying the soil. It held a different texture, heavier, more compact. Water, he said. Anna gave a small nod. It stays longer beneath the surface, she replied. Even when the top looks dry. Hayes pressed his boot gently into the ground, then lifted it. The impression remained. Not deep. Not obvious. But there. It holds, he said. Longer than it should. Anna continued walking, and he rose to follow. The path curved gradually, just as she had described, the shift so subtle it could be missed if someone expected something more defined. The landscape did not guide them. She did. After another quarter mile, she stopped again, this time near a slight rise in the terrain, barely noticeable unless viewed from the right angle. From here, she said, stepping to the side, allowing Hayes to take her place. He moved forward, standing where she had indicated, then looked out across the land. The view changed. Not dramatically. But enough. The line of sight extended farther than expected, revealing movement patterns that would otherwise remain hidden. You can see everything that approaches, he said. Without being seen yourself. Anna did not respond. She did not need to. Hayes remained there for a moment longer, taking in the distance, the angles, the quiet intelligence of the terrain itself. Then he stepped back. We would have walked right past this, he said. Every time. Anna's gaze remained steady. Because you were looking for something else, she replied. Hayes let out a slow breath, the kind that carried realization more than surprise. Around them, the world remained unchanged. The same ground. The same air. The same quiet stretch of land that had not moved, had not hidden itself, had not done anything at all. And yet, everything about it was different now. Hayes looked back toward the direction they had come from, then forward again, aligning what he had seen on the map with what now stood directly in front of him. We missed it, he said quietly. Anna shifted her weight slightly, her boots pressing into the same ground that had revealed itself only to those who paid attention. It was never hidden, she said. Hayes nodded once. Not in agreement alone, but in understanding. The path ahead remained quiet, unmarked, waiting. And this time, they were finally seeing it. They did not rush back. The return walk carried a different weight, not urgency, but clarity that settled into each step. The ground beneath them no longer looked ordinary. Every shift in color, every slight compression in the soil, every quiet curve in the land held meaning now. Captain Robert Hayes walked beside Anna Weiss this time, not behind, not ahead, but aligned, his pace matching hers without adjustment. Neither of them spoke for several minutes. The silence was not empty. It was filled with everything that had already been understood. Hayes glanced down once more at the ground, noticing details he would have ignored the day before. A faint line where grass bent in a consistent direction. A shallow indentation that held shape longer than it should. Small things. Obvious now. Invisible before. It was always this clear, he asked finally, his voice low, almost careful. Anna did not look at him. Her eyes remained forward. Yes, she said. But clarity depends on where you choose to stand. Hayes let that settle, his gaze moving from the ground to the horizon, then back again, recalibrating distance, angle, intention. When they reached the edge of the camp, the sounds returned gradually. Voices. Movement. Routine. Nothing had changed there. And yet, everything had. As they stepped inside, the familiar structure of the building felt different, not because it had altered, but because the way it was understood had shifted. The map room waited as they had left it. The same table. The same lines. The same single mark. Hayes walked in first this time, his movement direct, unhesitating. He stepped to the table and looked down, not searching, not questioning, just confirming what he now knew to be true. Anna entered a moment later, her presence quiet, steady as before. Hayes reached for the folder from earlier, opening it again, but now his eyes moved differently across the pages. He was no longer looking for confirmation. He was looking for absence. They never mentioned the soil, he said. Not once. Anna stepped closer, her gaze briefly touching the papers before returning to the map. Because they were not looking at it, she replied. Hayes nodded slowly. He set the papers aside, not dismissing them, but placing them in their proper context. Incomplete. Useful, but limited. His attention returned fully to the map. The mark he had made earlier seemed almost understated now, a quiet acknowledgement of something that did not need emphasis. He picked up the pencil again, then paused, not because he was unsure, but because he understood the weight of adding anything further. Instead, he placed it down again without marking. We do not add more until we understand more, he said. Anna gave a slight nod. That is how you avoid drawing the wrong conclusions, she said. Hayes looked at her then, directly, without distance, without hesitation. You did not just show us a path, he said. You changed how we see everything around it. Anna met his gaze, calm, steady, unchanged. It was always there, she replied. Hayes allowed a small breath to leave him, not relief, but recognition of something larger than the moment itself. Around them, the room remained still, the map open, the single mark quiet but undeniable. Outside, the day continued as it always did. Inside, the way they understood it had already shifted. And this time, no one needed to argue about what was in front of them. They simply needed to see it. The room did not feel the same as it had the day before, not because anything physical had changed, but because nothing inside it could return to what it had been. The map still lay open, the single mark still quiet, still precise, still enough. Captain Robert Hayes stood beside the table, his attention no longer fixed on proving or questioning, but on understanding what came next. He reached for another folder, thicker than the last, its edges worn from repeated handling. He opened it slowly, scanning line after line, but this time his eyes did not follow the structure of the report. They moved between the words, searching for what was not written. Anna Weiss remained near the table, her presence steady, her silence unchanged. Hayes stopped on a page and turned it slightly toward her. This report, he said, describes movement through the eastern ridge. It confirms tracks, timing, direction. He paused, then added, but it does not explain how they got there. Anna glanced at the page briefly, then back at the map. Because the path they used is not on the report, she said. Hayes nodded. And now we know why. He placed the report beside the map, aligning it carefully, not overlapping, not merging, but letting the difference remain visible. We trusted what was recorded, he continued. But we never questioned what was missing. Anna stepped closer, her gaze moving across both the paper and the map, not comparing them, but understanding their relationship. Most people trust what is written, she said. Few notice what is not. Hayes let out a slow breath, the kind that marked a shift from assumption to awareness. He picked up the pencil again, hesitated for only a moment, then began to draw a second line. Not replacing the first. Not correcting it. Just adding another path, one that followed the curve she had walked, connecting points that had never been connected before. The line was light, almost understated, but its presence changed everything. Hayes set the pencil down and stepped back slightly, taking in both lines at once. One direct. One hidden. Both real. Two paths, he said quietly. Anna nodded. One for those who follow, she replied. One for those who observe. Hayes looked at her, then back at the map. And we chose the wrong one, he said. Anna did not correct him. She did not soften the statement. She simply let it remain. Outside, footsteps passed the hallway, voices carried briefly, then faded again. Inside, the room held steady, grounded in a clarity that had not been there before. Hayes closed the folder, not dismissing it, but placing it aside with intention. From now on, he said, his voice even, we verify what we do not see, not just what we do. Anna's gaze remained on the map. That is how you find what others miss, she said. Hayes gave a small nod, then rested his hand lightly on the table, not pressing down, not controlling, just present. The map did not argue. It never had. It simply waited for someone to read it correctly. Hayes looked at the two lines again, then at the single mark that had started everything. You changed the question, he said quietly. Anna met his gaze, calm, steady. No, she replied. I just showed you where to look. The room fell still once more, not empty, not uncertain, but resolved in a way that did not require further words. The map remained open, the lines clear, the silence intact. And this time, no one mistook completeness for truth. The lines on the map no longer competed with each other. They coexisted, quiet and undeniable, each representing a version of reality that had once been separated by assumption. Captain Robert Hayes stood with both hands resting lightly on the edge of the table, his gaze moving slowly between them, not searching for errors, but understanding the space between what was seen and what was understood. The room held a stillness that no longer came from uncertainty, but from recognition. Anna Weiss remained near the table, her posture unchanged, her presence steady as ever, but now fully integrated into the way the room functioned. Hayes reached for the second folder, one that had not yet been opened, its surface clean, almost untouched. He flipped it open, scanning quickly, then more slowly, his eyes adjusting to a new way of reading. These reports confirm movement patterns over the last week, he said. Consistent. Predictable. He paused, then added, and incomplete. Anna did not move closer. She did not need to. They follow what is visible, she said. Hayes nodded. And ignore what is not. He placed the folder beside the others, not stacking them, but spreading them slightly, creating a wider view, allowing gaps to become visible where before everything had seemed aligned. His hand hovered briefly over the map, then moved to the edge again, as if he understood now that the map did not need to be controlled to be correct. We have been measuring accuracy by repetition, he said. If enough reports say the same thing, we assume it is true. Anna's gaze shifted slightly, not toward the papers, but toward the small mark that had started everything. Repetition does not create truth, she said. It only reinforces what is already believed. Hayes let that settle, the weight of it quiet but precise. He looked back at the reports, then at the map, then back again, aligning them not by agreement, but by contrast. So we changed the measure, he said. Anna did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice remained calm, steady. You look for what does not repeat, she said. Hayes nodded once, the motion slow, deliberate. Exactly. He picked up the pencil again, but instead of drawing, he tapped it lightly against the table, once, then set it down. The absence of movement felt intentional, as if restraint had become part of the process. We rebuild the picture, he continued, not from what is confirmed, but from what is missing. Anna stepped forward then, just one step, her movement quiet but purposeful. She placed her hand lightly above the map, not touching it, but close enough to indicate the space between the two lines Hayes had drawn earlier. Here, she said. Hayes followed her hand. The space between the lines had no markings. No labels. No data. Just absence. This is where you look next, she said. Hayes studied that space for a moment, then nodded slowly. The gap, he said. Anna lowered her hand. That is where assumptions live, she replied. The room held that statement without reaction, letting it settle into the structure of everything that had already changed. Outside, the day moved forward as it always did, unaware of the shift taking place inside. Hayes straightened, his posture no longer shaped by authority alone, but by understanding earned through quiet correction. We missed it because it did not demand attention, he said. Anna met his gaze, her expression unchanged. The most important things rarely do, she replied. Hayes allowed a small breath to leave him, not in frustration, but in acknowledgement. He looked once more at the map, at the two lines, at the space between them, then stepped back, giving the table room, giving the process room, giving the truth room to exist without interference. And for the first time, the silence in the room did not feel like something waiting to be filled. It felt complete. The room had grown quieter, not because there was less to say, but because nothing unnecessary remained. The map lay open, the two lines visible, the space between them now the center of attention rather than an empty gap. Captain Robert Hayes stood at a slight distance from the table, arms relaxed at his sides, his posture no longer carrying the weight of decision, but the responsibility of understanding. Anna Weiss remained near the edge of the table, her presence unchanged, her silence still doing more than words ever had. Hayes looked again at the space between the lines, not as something missing, but as something waiting. We have been building around certainty, he said quietly. But certainty was never the problem. Anna did not respond immediately. When she did, her voice remained calm, steady, almost neutral. Certainty becomes a problem when it replaces observation, she said. Hayes nodded slowly, absorbing that without resistance. He stepped closer to the table again, his eyes tracing the edges of both paths, then returning to the gap between them. The absence no longer felt like emptiness. It felt like direction. He reached for the pencil, holding it for a moment without moving, as if weighing not the action, but the intention behind it. Then, carefully, he made a small series of marks within the gap. Not a line. Not a shape. Just a sequence of points, spaced deliberately, suggesting possibility without forcing conclusion. He set the pencil down. We do not fill the gap, he said. We map it. Anna watched the marks, then gave a slight nod. That is the difference, she said. Hayes stepped back again, allowing the map to hold its own structure. Around them, the room remained still, the air steady, the light consistent. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just clarity, settled into place. A moment passed before Hayes spoke again. Tomorrow, we expand this, he said. Every report, every route, every assumption. He paused, then added, we look for what does not fit. Anna's gaze remained on the map. That is where the truth waits, she said. Hayes allowed a small breath to leave him, not out of fatigue, but recognition. He turned slightly toward the window, where the light had shifted again, softer now, less direct, as if the day itself was slowing down. You never tried to convince us, he said. Anna met his gaze, her expression unchanged, her tone steady. It would not have mattered, she replied. Hayes nodded once, the motion quiet but complete. No, he said. It would not have. He looked back at the map one last time, at the lines, at the points, at the space that had once been ignored and was now central to everything. The structure was still incomplete. But it was no longer incorrect. And that difference was enough. Anna stepped back slightly, returning to where she had begun, her presence once again quiet, almost unnoticeable if someone was not paying attention. But now, everyone who entered the room would notice. Not because she spoke. Not because she argued. But because the map itself had changed the way they saw her. Hayes remained where he was for a moment longer, then turned toward the door, his movement calm, unhurried. He paused just before stepping out, glancing back once more, not at the table, but at the space where everything had shifted without noise, without force, without resistance. And for the first time, he understood something he had not considered before. The truth had never needed to be defended. It had only needed to be seen. The door closed softly behind Captain Robert Hayes, leaving the room exactly as it had been, yet nothing inside it remained the same. The map stayed open under steady light, its surface quiet, its lines unchanged, its meaning transformed. Anna Weiss stood alone now, her presence as still as ever, her gaze resting not on any single point, but across the whole of it, as if she had always seen it this way. The small mark remained. The second line remained. The series of points within the gap remained. Nothing had been erased. Nothing had been corrected. Only understood. Outside, the world continued without pause. Voices moved through hallways. Footsteps crossed wooden floors. Orders were given, received, carried out. But none of that entered the room. Here, the silence held. Not empty. Not waiting. Complete. Anna stepped closer to the table, her movement quiet, almost unnoticeable. She looked at the space between the lines again, not searching, not questioning, simply acknowledging what had already revealed itself. Her hand hovered briefly above the map, not to point, not to guide, but as if measuring the distance between what had been believed and what had been true. Then she lowered it. No gesture was needed anymore. The map no longer required interpretation. It required attention. Minutes passed, or perhaps only seconds. Time did not move the same way here. The light shifted slightly, softening the edges of the paper, casting a faint shadow across the marks that had changed everything without raising a voice. Anna stepped back, returning to stillness, her posture unchanged, her presence once again quiet enough to be overlooked by anyone who had not learned to see. The door opened briefly, a young officer stepping in, hesitating when he saw the map, the marks, the stillness of the room. His eyes moved quickly at first, then slower, adjusting, learning. He said nothing. He did not need to. He stepped closer to the table, his gaze drawn to the space between the lines, to the points that suggested something more than absence. He looked back at Anna for a moment, uncertain, then returned his attention to the map. "This was not here before," he said quietly. Anna did not respond. She did not confirm. She did not explain. The map was enough. The officer nodded slowly, not in agreement, but in understanding, then stepped back, leaving the room as quietly as he had entered. The door closed again. Silence returned. But this time, it was different. It carried forward. It moved beyond the room. It changed how others would enter, how they would look, how they would question. Not loudly. Not all at once. But steadily. Like light moving across a surface, revealing what had always been there. Anna remained where she was, her presence unchanged, her voice unused, her impact undeniable. She had not argued. She had not insisted. She had not raised her voice. She had simply pointed. And the map had done the rest. The lines stayed where they were. The marks remained small. The space between them remained open. But no one who saw it now would mistake it for empty again. And somewhere beyond the room, beyond the walls, beyond the structure of reports and assumptions, something larger had shifted, quietly, permanently. Not because someone forced it. Not because someone proved it. But because, finally, someone chose to see it.